Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to week 10 of the Slow Stitch Along for 2024. Sorry, my hair was around the back of my neck. This week's inspiration I've taken from feathers for two reasons. One is lately in the Northern Hemisphere, apologies to friends down under, there have been signs of spring in the air. And one of the signs of spring for me is when I walk in the woodlands in the morning with the dogs. I hear the birds singing more and more, and obviously birds have got feathers, and I associate that kind of feeling of spring coming, and maybe in the southern hemisphere, if you're not liking the heat too much, you could, hope for cooler weather, with hope, hope of new beginnings and so on. And when I think of hope and feathers, I straight away think of Emily Dickinson. And I've checked, and it's in the public domain, so I can read it to you. I'm sure many of you know it already. I will have to peer over the top of my glasses to read. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, and sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm, that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land, and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. So hope, the thing with feathers. And feathers makes me think about my many years of doing free machine quilting. And I've had some discussions here in the comments with people who also do free machine quilting, because I said in a recent video that I think there are elements in that practice that do relate to slow stitch, that slow stitch doesn't necessarily have to be hand stitch, and it's about the mindfulness of the process. So my feathers that I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you how, although obviously you can do any kind of feather you like, will take inspiration from my free machine quilting feathers. So I'm going to insert here just a little tiny clip of a couple of pieces of mine with freehand stitched, machine stitch feathers on them, and then we'll go to the desk and we'll get started. Okay? Okay, I don't know if you can hear me, I hope so, because I don't have the microphone attached, but these are the feather quilts that I was talking about just now. So there's 3 panels. The fabric was actually, I bought it, but it had been dyed by a woman called Heide Stoll-Weber, and so it's freehand quilted. There's no, I didn't draw on the cloth at all. I just put the piece under the machine and stitched freehand with the feed dogs down. So you can see there's 3 similar but slightly different types of feather going up the middle, and then round the outside is pebbling, little circly things. So that's that one. The middle one has got also pebbles going up the spine of the feather, and the purple one is just got hasn't got the curlicues in between. So they're all slightly different. The colouring in the actual feathers themselves was done with markle sticks. So anyway, I hope you could hear me a bit, and let's go to the desk and start with this week's project. Okay, I'm now at the desk. Before I get into this week's project, I just wanted to talk a little bit about last week, week 9, the Wonky 9 patch. I was absolutely blown away by the number of fantastic grid poems that you all wrote. I saw them in the Facebook group and on Instagram, and I wanted to share this one with you, which was by Sally Ann. I mean, there were so many I could have chosen from, but one of the things that stood out about this one was that Sally Ann used actual phrases in her boxes rather than words, and so I've written it out. Hopefully you can see it, because I think they're a visual thing as well, but I'll read it too in both directions. So Sally Ann wrote, "Stitching with cats, stitching with grandkids, stitching alone, creates happiness, creates joy, creates peacefulness, and memories in the heart for a lifetime." And then read the other way. "Stitching with cats creates happiness and memories. Stitching with grandkids creates joy in the heart. Stitching alone creates peacefulness for a lifetime." I think that is just genius, so I would like you all to give a huge round of applause to Sally Ann. Okay? And thank you so much for all of your enthusiasm always, but also that so many of you embrace the idea of writing your own poem. Okay, the other thing that I've had a suggestion from Donna, hello Donna, which I thought was a brilliant suggestion. Sorry about the glary paper. I'll move it to one side for a minute. About pointing out before I start all the supplies that you'll need, so that then if you want to stitch along with me, you can pause the video once I've told you what you need, go off and gather, and then come back and stitch. So for this week, we're going to do a fantasy feather, like I said, based on the Free Machine stuff. So what you will need is some paper. This is just regular copy paper, and actually all you need is a little piece the size of your project. You know, my book pages are 5 by 7, so I've made my piece 4 by 6 inches so that it'll sit on my page. And then you'll need a pencil. I've got 2 pencils. I've got a sort of normal hard pencil, you know, and then I've got quite a soft pencil for drawing on fabric with. And then you'll need a felt tip pen, you know, just a black felt tip pen. You'll need fabric scissors and paper scissors, and then you'll need little scraps of cloth. I'm talking tiny scraps. So I've just got a little pile here. I'm in the sort of reds and pinks and purples scheme. I've got 7 plumes on my feathers, so I've got 7 different colours at least. And then you'll need some threads, you know, embroidery threads. I always use double-stranded, 6-stranded embroidery floss. I've also got a bit of something to couch on, so if you wanted beads or, you know, things like that as well, little scraps of lace, embellishments. And then obviously needles, applique pins, those of you who've got them already are very handy, otherwise pins. And I think that's it. I said needles, yeah, so that's pretty, oh, and some tape of some kind. I've just got masking tape, but if you've just got regular sellotape or scotch tape or something like that, okay? So, when I used to do freehand machine quilting, I never drew on the fabric, but I did draw a lot on scraps of paper to practice, because then you get something called muscle memory. So I would do endless feathers like this, and I always would start at the top with the spine. I hope you can see the pencil. I'm just going to check. That's a bit fine. Let's use the darker pencil. So I start with the spine. And I'd never take the pencil off the paper, because when you're stitching, you can't, you know, every time you stop and start with the needle, obviously you've got a thread to end off. Now don't start freaking out. I'm going to give you links online if you want to trace, if you think this is, you know, too much. So there I've got 6 plumes, and then I might go back and put a middle one in there like that. And that would then be my template for this week. And then if you want to do fancy stuff afterwards with stitching, you know, curly cues like that, I wouldn't bother drawing them. You can do those later on with stitch. So the first thing you need to do is take your little piece of paper that's the right size for your project and get yourself a feather on there somehow. I drew with pencil, and then I went over with my black felt tip, and also I've numbered all the plumes. And then you take your piece of cloth that you want to use for your front of your work, and you put masking tape on, and you go and tape it to one of the light boxes that you all have all around your homes, also known as windows. If you've actually got a light box, then, you know, go for it. And then you want to trace the outline with your softer pencil onto your cloth, and then you see I've also numbered the plumes. If you just want to go for this, you know, if you just want to cut shapes out and applique them on freehand, that's absolutely up to you. But I'm sort of showing you the more, you know, I don't know what way to call it, the sort of, you know, easy way of doing it if you're not comfortable doing that. So then you take your little template after you've traced, and then with your paper scissors you cut out all your little shapes. I don't need to show you how to cut out. So here are all the little shapes cut out of my previous one. And then you use these as templates to cut your cloth. So then all I would do is, I've got all kinds of different cloths here. Just trying to think which would be the easiest to show you on. Let's use this bit of purple. This is batik, which I don't often like hand stitching because it's such a high thread count, but for little bits like this it's probably okay. So then I just pin my template on with one of my applique pins and just cut around it. And I'm not being super precise. And here where you've got these real little pointy points, you can just make them a bit bigger, you know. So I just hold that with my thumb and cut it around. And I know some people might use glue stick to hold it in place. You can absolutely do that, then do that on the wrong side with your bit of glue. But I get on fine with the scissors. So you see, you just cut them all out. I'm not going to do all that. I've done a bit of advanced preparation. I know you all, well, most of you liked the long video last week, but I think if I did this entirely live, so to speak, you know, it would be hours and hours. So you need to cut out all your little shapes ready. And let's get rid of all that. Now I've done the drawing, I can get rid of this cutting mat. So you've got a nice green cloth underneath, which many of you said you like, so I've kept. Certainly nice to work on. And then what I want to do is take my foreground cloth and baste it to a backing cloth, because I just always like to work through 2 layers. I just find it's more pleasant to stitch through and it's sturdier. And I'm just going to take this opportunity to show again the invisible baste with a dark thread. Obviously use a matching thread if you want it to be invisible. So I will just baste all around the edge, so you come through from the back. I have got a knot in the thread. Make sure I'm in shot, would help. And then I do a tiny back stitch on the back, and then a bigger stitch, on the front, and a bigger stitch on the back. So then you've got this tiny little stitch on the front, and then I've moved maybe a good ½ inch on the back. So a tiny back stitch on the back, on the front, tiny back stitch on the front, and a bigger stitch on the back. Whoops, and I'm gathering up all the loose threads of my torn bit of sheet, but that doesn't matter really, except for when it does that. So I've just done that all the way around my piece. And once you get into the rhythm of it, it is a really nice stitch to do. I do it in most videos, I think, but a couple of people have asked where they can learn how to do it, so maybe I've done it, you know, and it's not been clear enough, so hopefully that's clear with the darker coloured thread. So I'm going to get that off there, put that to one side. So then what I've done here on this piece is I've laid all my pieces on, following, you know, the numbers which I drew on the cloth. Where have I put that now? There. Following the numbers which I drew on the cloth. And I've pinned them on. Maybe I'll do one just to show you. There's that one I just cut, the purple one. Which was, what number was that? And don't turn them the wrong way up, because you won't know where they go then. I can't remember which one I cut out. Doesn't really matter, does it? Not for this. So I just pin that with my applique pin, and then I will invisible baste again all around the edge. And depending on your cloth, if you've got a really frayy cloth, like I used this bit of Osnaburg, I've stayed in a bit from the edge. What's that, maybe 3/16 of an inch, you know, 3 millimeters maybe. It doesn't really matter, you know, it's just basically this is just to hold that little piece on there so that you can then come and do all your fancy stitching over the top. It's another form of applique. This is kind of raw edge applique. So I would just do the same invisible baste. It's really annoying that, isn't it? So I'll cut it all off. All around the edge of each patch. Like that. So this, because it's batik and it's quite stable, I'm really close to the edge. Probably 1/8 of an inch, a bit less. So you just need to do that with all your patches, you know, choose your colours, cut out your little shapes, pin them all on. I pin them and sew them, and then pin the next one and sew them, because I find if they're all pinned, then you've got all these pins that catches your thread and so on. So that's just how I did it. One thing you do need to pay a little bit of attention to when you are coming towards the middle here. Do you see? Those little pointy ends, I've just decided here and there whether I want it. Do you see that one? This one's going underneath that one. Focus, focus, focus. And this one's laying on top. You know, just fiddle about until you're happy with it. This one also has gone underneath. And so now that's ready for me to go and do my fancy stitching on. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to talk about what I'm doing, and I'm probably going to talk about other things as well. Whoops, and I'm going to headbutt you, I'm sorry about that. Let's clear all this away. There we go. Oh, I've also got my orts on hand in case there's anything handy in there to use. So I hope that's all clear up to that point. I think the first thing I'm going to do is couch some of this for the spine of the feather. Just like that, because some of those little points where it meets are a little bit unpleasant to look at, shall we say. So I thought if I just couch that over, that'll hide a multitude of sins. Can I couch it with that I had in there already? That's a bit orange. I'll change colour. Let's find a needle. Pick a needle. That one. A bendy one, yes. I have a favourite needle. I'm sure many of you do. Let's pull a bit out of the orts. I'm just going to use a single strand of floss in a similar colour. Keep creeping away. And do the couching. I think many of you have already seen the couching video if you didn't know how to do it already. I couch slightly different to some people. There's, you know, many different ways to do the same thing sometimes. So I just hold that on with my thumb of my left hand because I'm right-handed. Come through from the back to one side of the thing that I'm couching, and then lay the thread over. And then on the other side, I just take a forward stitch, but on the same side. And don't catch the thing down at all. So it's tricky in the beginning. And I've pulled my knot through. Oh, that's not a good start, Catherine. Right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get that away a minute. I'm going to anchor it on the back of the back stitch, because this cloth is quite fine. Oh yeah, the linen, you know, even even the linen was fine to trace through against the window on a dull day, because I used a dark pen, very black felt tip pen. Right, I'm going to come back up in roughly the right place and I'm going to start again. Actually, what I'm going to do... Sorry, that's the dogs barking. My children are here, it's half term here, and they've just been out to the shops and they've just come back. So there might be some dog barks and excited dogs with the children coming in. Now once you're started, yeah, I'm going to leave a longer end and then I can always trim that later. I think that would be the sensible thing to do. So I go over to the other side and then I take a little forward stitch on the same side. And then hop over and take a forward stitch. Oh dear, dear, dear. That's still those threads from that other piece. They're determined to get involved in the proceedings. And I'm just fiddling about with where I want the couch bit of wool to lay. You can also, when you're couching, if you find this way too fiddly, go in on the opposite side and then come up on the opposite side, so you make a slanty stitch. I hope you can see that. Do you see? If I tap, recently learned, and it makes it focus. So you can also do it like that. So you come across and go under the couching thread. And then if I show you on the back, then you see you get, on the way I do it, you get these little parallel running stitches on the wrong side, and the other way you get this row of slanty stitches on the other side. So, you know, try both and see which you prefer. I'm going to go back to this way. If you can hear voices in the background, it's said children. And I'm just going to lay that spine, that couch wool over the spine. And any rough little ends where the points didn't lay in nicely and so on will be hidden from view. Obviously, if you wanted to do something more around the edges, and I might do that in a minute, where I basted them on, you can. Maybe that's what I'll do next. But I like to do the invisible base because then it's all down, it's all held, and then you can just, you know, play without worrying about having to hold anything at the same time. Just becomes a surface to stitch on. Now I have to decide what I'm going to do when I get up to this end. I could carry on up there with that and make that a spine. And then if I did that, I think I would feel the need to do it in all of them. I'm not sure if I do want to do that. So, is my daughter coming peeping in the doorway? Yes, I am filming. She's going. So I think I'm just going to cut it there and do something else in there. Maybe do some other kinds of embroidery stitches. Cut. I don't know why I went for pinks and purples. It's not really a colour I use, you know, a colour combination I use a lot. I think what happens is I go in the scraps and I pull a piece out, and that kind of determines the other pieces. And so once I pulled out, I think I pulled out this bit of old chair that I keep using here and there. It was on a chair that I bought in an antique shop that needed to be recovered. I'll just finish off on the back. And that sort of determined my colour theme. There we go. So you see on the back, apart from there where I showed you that other way with the two slanty stitches, you get these two little parallel lines of running stitch, or at least you could see them if I kept them in shot. You see that? Tap. So what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? I think I'm going to do some spines on the plumes. I don't know what colour to do that in, or maybe I'll do it in many colours. How about green? I think I might use some green. Licking my thread, threading my needle. I'm sorry, I'm a bit distracted because of the children being here. I can hear them moving around, and yeah, sorry if I'm not as chatty and relaxed as usual. I expect I'll get into it at one point. I think I will do split back stitch. So you start with a forward stitch, just a normal running stitch, and then you go back into the previous stitch and you just go slightly into the stitch. Can you see? I have to keep tapping. You just go slightly into the previous stitch, and then you come forward again in the direction of travel. When I say slightly, it's, you know, literally just, I mean, you can vary it, you could go wherever you wanted into it, but instead of in a normal back stitch where you go down pretty much into the same hole, if you go slightly into the previous stitch, you get a sort of more lined effect rather than seeing the individual stitches as much. You could also do stem stitch. Stem stitch, you go to the side of the previous stitch to make a line. I like doing the split back stitch. There's also my husband downstairs in a meeting on Zoom. So I'm just following the curve of the you know, the curve of the plume shape. When I get up to here, I think I'm going to go down excuse me, to the back, and then I'm going to come up somewhere else, like a little bit further down, again into the stitch line, and I'm going to do some, you know, like the veins of a leaf. I'm kind of mimicking the kinds of things I used to do when I did free motion. And if you put a bit of curve into your lines, it really gives an almost three-dimensional shape to the plume. I'm going to come back down here a bit further down. I'm not worrying on the back that I'm jumping a big way, you know. Not for this. Maybe if you were doing it on something that was going to be a usable thing, you might want to skip a couple of stitches in the background cloth, you know, take a couple of little stitches to get you to the right place so you didn't get great big loops on the back. I think I want to take that one slightly further now as well. Now I see it. That was probably not the best choice of cloth for raw edge applique Osnaburg because it's really fraying, but hey, it doesn't matter. That's better. See that? Just that one more stitch just seemed to give it a bit of extra movement. I'll show you what I meant before. So say I wanted to come down here next to go through to put another spine, but you can see that. Instead of just jumping over there and leaving that long loop, all I would do is just take a couple of little bites of the backing cloth on the way. Like that, just so you get, you know, big stitches rather than long loops. And I'll come up here somewhere. I used to free motion quilting or free machine embroidery, or, you know, whatever you want to call it. I was one of my most popular workshops in England when I was teaching for students, and also for me. I really enjoyed teaching it, because it would be something that maybe people were not afraid of, but thought they couldn't do. But everybody could. Well, everybody except for one lady. There was one lady who insisted that her sewing machine couldn't do it. And even when I showed her that it could, she just, you know, she couldn't. She'd come with a friend, and I think the friend had pressurised her into coming. But apart from that one poor lady who really had a block, and I failed as a teacher because I couldn't find a way past it. Everybody, once they got the, it's kind of a click in the brain that has to happen. Everybody I ever taught really then went on to enjoy it. Right, I'm going to call that done for that one. Because it's drawing with a needle and thread, you know, it's drawing with a sewing machine. What you do, if you don't know and if you're interested, is you drop the feed dogs or cover them if your machine can't. And I'm talking about any domestic sewing machine. I've free motioned on my treadle machine even. You don't need a fancy machine at all. You drop the feed dogs and then you move the piece. This would be small and fiddly, but you move the piece around under the machine. and the needle's obviously going up and down. So it's like you're drawing, but instead of moving the pencil over the paper, you're moving the paper under the pencil. Do I want to carry on with the green theme, I wonder? And, you know, I would always start people just meandering about. Oh, that's a bit bright for me. And there go the dogs again. Let's have this more muted green. Yeah, I would always start people with just meandering about, but very quickly they'd be writing their name or, you know, drawing butterflies and flowers and things. And my favourite things to stitch were always feathers and pebbles. And actually, it's a handy skill these days if I have to mend one of the horse's rugs, because you can keep the piece going in the same direction. You don't have to turn it through 360 degrees at any point. So my horse's rugs often have pebbles or feathers or things like that stitched on them, because I can just put the whole rug under the sewing machine and move it around like this to mend it, rather than, you know, having to stitch a straight line that way and then wrestle this great big horse rug round in the other direction. Right, there's my needle gone. So yeah, still a handy skill, although I don't do it on, you know, I don't do it for fun anymore. But I have not forgotten how apparently it's like riding a bicycle, you know, even drawing them. And when I was really into it, I would see shapes everywhere in the world, you know. I would see in wrought iron railings or patterns in carpets, or just everywhere you see patterns. And then you go and get a scrap of paper and then you'd practice doing it in one movement without lifting your pencil off the page. Bearing in mind that every time you lift the pencil and put it down somewhere else, when you translate that into free machine quilting, you have to end off your thread and start again. So yeah, there are many, many instances where I would find patterns and go and try stitching them. I remember once we were on holiday in Bruges in Belgium, which is a beautiful city. It's famous for its lace. And we were queuing up to go into, I believe, a lace museum, probably. And it was summer, and in front of us in the queue was a man with lots of tattoos. And I surreptitiously got a notebook out of my pocket and I was copying down the patterns in some of his tattoos into my notebook. He didn't notice, luckily. No, I'm sure he was a nice man. He was going into a lace museum, so, you know. He can't have been that much of a big tough guy. I'm just doing exactly the same thing again. And I hope you can't hear my son blowing his nose while I'm filming. Sorry about that. He has allergies, so when he comes home, the house is quite old and dusty, and all the animals, his allergies kick off. I'm sorry if you could hear that. It wasn't me. It wasn't me this time, sniffing and clearing my throat. Apparently it runs in the family. Half term, eh? And I also don't know if you can hear the washing machine spinning beneath me. They come home with all their laundry. I have recently, the other day, been into the woods and retrieved. I'm working on a project for the exhibition. I shall start as if, you know, some of you don't know what I'm talking about. Apologies if you do already. Back in September I made 13 little cloth books from old sheets, and I stitched into some of them and I trapped things between the pages of some of them, and so forth, and I hid them in the woods in various places. I did 13 because our woodland is 13 acres. So some were tied to trees, some were buried in the ground, some were, you know, there's one in the stream still which I could not retrieve. I couldn't find it. It must be in there somewhere. Anyway, so I've got all of them out now except for that one in the stream, because the first 2 weeks in May I'm involved in an exhibition in the UK with the group that I've been a member of for the last 10 years called CQ West. And the exhibition will be in the Three Stories Gallery in Nailsworth in Gloucestershire. And I'll be over there for, I think I'm over there for the first week. So for some of those days I'll be in the gallery myself. So if any of you are, you know, in that area of the world and would like to come along, it would be wonderful to meet some of you. I shall, once the stewarding rota's prepared and I know what days I'm there, I shall put it, I'll say it here, I'll put it on Instagram, I'll put it in the Facebook group and on my Facebook page. Is there any more green there? I might have to use that bright green, but it's really too bright. I can't bring myself to, I'm sorry. I'm going to use some more of this, I think. So I got all the little books, and I did a little video, well, my daughter videoed me, which I put over on Ko-fi for my Ko-fi supporters, of me wandering around the woods getting these little bundles. But I will make a video here now that they're all washed and dried. I'll make a little video here for YouTube, for the main channel, showing you all the books, how they look now. And I am thinking of doing, for one of these weekly projects, something along those lines for you all, so you can all make, maybe not books, maybe just a piece, or, you know, or whatever you want to do. I don't usually say in advance what future things will be, but I just thought of it while I was doing the books. I thought, well, maybe this is something people will be interested in. So I'm giving that some thought, so be prepared for that. And I appreciate not everybody has access to woodlands and nature and things, so I have thought of ways that everybody, even if you're in a flat or an apartment and you don't even have a balcony, how you could participate as well if you would like to. And meanwhile I'm just doing my green stems, green split back stitch on the spines of my feathers. Because the whole process of doing that, of making something and stitching it, and then leaving it somewhere for the elements to work on it. Well, number one, I find it interesting, and especially when you can then go and retrieve your little thing and see what changes have been made. But also, for me, it's in the spirit of letting go of something, you know, it's letting go of perfectionism and preciousness over we're back to Gollum, precious, over your finished piece of work. So you make something and then you sort of relinquish control of that something. There's something powerful in your creative process of allowing yourself to do that. So we'll do that. We had an artist, a member of our group, a few years ago. He's not there anymore. He's moved on to other things. But he did something similar. He would make these pieced pieces of wall art, textile wall art, out of wool, mostly reclaimed wool, I believe. And he would, spend many hours arranging the colours and the sizes of the patches and stitching them together and so on. And then he would throw them into the washing machine on the hot setting and let them, because they were all different kinds of wool and different thicknesses of wool and so on, they would react differently to the heat and the water and everything else, and they would come out all crinkled and rumpled and distorted. They were beautiful. But that process of making the piece, you know, controlling the placement of the different cloths and the colours and so on, and then relinquishing it, in his case, to the washing machine, was, you know, to me it's the same. It was the same idea of me putting little books made out of old sheets into the woods. When I lived in the West Country, I used to go with my daughter quite often to Glastonbury, which is a town in Somerset, famous for the Glastonbury Festival, although that's not at not in Glastonbury itself. But it's if you don't know it, it's quite a alternative kind of town. Well, it's a little bit touristy these days, but it's still got the, you know, it's got shops where you can buy incense and gems and textiles from India and all kinds of stuff. And there are often people walking around in what some people would call fancy dress, but, you know, I just call dress. Those kinds, you know, those. I think they're lovely people. So my daughter Lily, when she was little, would love to go there and go into those shops where they had basket upon basket of goodies, of beads and buttons and little ornaments and, you know, lovely textiles and tassels and all that kind of thing. And then she, you know, she could sit cross-legged on the floor for hours in one certain shop just sorting through all the little baskets for bits and bobs. And then we would go to the baker's in Glastonbury, which is called Burns the Bread, and get a pasty, which is a kind of meat and potato pie. If you're not British, you might not know what a pasty is. And then we were going to sit on the steps of there was a sort of a monument in the town square with stone steps, and we'd sit there and eat our pasties and watch the interesting people going by. And there was quite often a chap there, a gentleman, who was drawing mandalas on the pavement in chalk, and, you know, he had a cap out for you to put a few coins in, and I believe traditionally they make mandalas also from coloured sand, you know, little piles of coloured sand. You know, a mandala is a circle with the different sections with the patterns repeating around, but he would draw these beautiful mandalas with all these coloured chalks. And then obviously he would pack up and go away at the end of the day, and then people would be walking over them, or it would rain or whatever. That's, again, the same principle as me putting my little books in the woods, I think. It's truly focused on the process. The product has no relevance whatsoever in the case of mandalas. And, you know, we always used to have a chat with him. But yeah, it's absolutely that same idea of letting go that I do think is very freeing to your creativity. And what is also not very freeing is my thread's going to run out before I've finished, so I might have to, I think there's some the same. I was going to say I might have to use a different green to finish it, which these days I would just do one day. At one time that would have freaked me out, having to use a different green. But I do think I have got some more the same. It's about being aware of yourself as well and how things make you feel while you're doing them, you know, the decisions that you take. That was a little bit the point of the choices thing, where I tried to take the choices away from you by making you pick strips out of a bag. It's just being aware while you're stitching. That's a huge part of slow stitch. I don't know if would I go as far as to say it's the most important part. Probably the mindfulness aspect. I'm trying to tie a knot in this titchy bit of thread. Titchy. Is titchy a word outside Great Britain? The UK? Titchy. Titchy tiny. Very, very small. Oh, there was talking of words. We knew we'd get there eventually. Talking of words, someone shared a word in the private Facebook group, which is hurkle-durkle. And hurkle-durkle is to stay in bed long past the time when you know you should get up. So then there was some discussion about could you hurkle-durkle and slow stitch at the same time? And I think, yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a fabulous idea. Hurkle-durkle, spelt how it sounds. It's a Scottish word, apparently, Scottish derivation. And the other word I've learnt this week from my husband, actually, who probably got it from Facebook, is, I think we all know the word disgruntled. If you're a bit fed up or put out or, you know, whatever, disgruntled. You can also say gruntled, apparently, which you don't hear. You know, you hear disgruntled, but gruntled is the opposite of disgruntled, so it means you're fine and content and, you know, perfectly happy with the way things are going. If my husband and Facebook is to be believed, I have not looked it up to check, which I usually do, librarian that I am. Certainly, in general, I don't believe anything I read on Facebook, apart from in our private group, of course, but that's different. That's completely different. And I'm so pleased that there's been 2 or 3 people that have come into the private group that have joined Facebook only to do that. They've resisted Facebook for years, but they've been enticed in, not by me necessarily, but by all the other lovely people in the Facebook group. If you're not a member yet, do check it out. I have now put the entry system, or whatever you want to call it, you know, onto automatic, because it was just too much for me to do it manually. In the beginning I was going through the applications myself, and, you know, I'm not doing that to be mean at all. I hope that's clear and understood. I want the group to be what I promised that the group would be, which would be a space for people doing this slow stitch along and any of the other, you know, rice bags and biscornu pin cushions and cloth pouches and stitch journals and all the rest of it, to have a community space there for everybody to share, you know, things that they've done in relation to all this stuff that we're doing here. So if I'm keeping people out, it's because I don't want that focus to be diluted in any way, you know. It's happened before, apparently, with other Facebook groups. I've had a couple of conversations by message with people who have been admins of other Facebook groups, and it starts off with a certain goal in mind, and then it becomes so big and, you know, out of control that it then loses its focus. So I'm doing my best to not let that happen. So I hope it doesn't come across as mean in any quarter. So anyway, if you're not a member and you want to be a member, do follow the link, which is always below these videos in the description. And then there will be a question asking you to confirm that you're a subscriber here. And then you'll be in. Oh, and then you have to agree to the group rules, but they're just the standard Facebook group rules about being respectful and, you know, so forth. Just being a decent human being, basically. My fear is that some people are being rejected when they are bona fide, you know, and that they just don't kind of, you know, they're not technologically aware, as am I not very. I'm learning, I'm having to learn. But then there's a message which I've written but which automatically goes out with a refusal saying, can you please confirm, so forth and so forth. So you get another go. So I hope it's working okay and people aren't being shut out. I haven't heard from anybody that they've been shut out and they can't get in. Well, there was one lady, but that was a technological problem which is now sorted. Hello, Rebecca. I was happy to see you posting the other day, finally. Yeah, computers, eh? It's wonderful that it can bring us all together like this, but sometimes it can be really frustrating. So I'm not doing anything very interesting here, am I? I'm just doing a split back stitch over and over again, which is making me glad that I did prepare in advance. And do you see the texture of the split back stitch? Is it focused? The trouble is I can hardly see because of the way the camera's set up. Tap. Put it there. I'm trying to see on the screen at the same time. Sorry, I'm just going to look in the interests of learning whether it's working or not. Yeah, it's focused, isn't it? So you can see the texture of the split back stitches. Right, I shall sit back down. See, I'm already up to 47 minutes. But my thinking is that those who like long videos, here's a long video. Those who don't can always fast forward or just watch the relevant bits. I've been asked here and there about doing timestamps. At this moment, it's not something I can give the time to. You know, where you put below the various points in the video where things happen. And also, I don't really think my videos, these types of videos, lend themselves to timestamps. You know, this is the part where she witters about X, this is the part where she witters about Y. It would be that, wouldn't it? The tutorial ones maybe more, you know, like the rice bag, here's where she makes the outer of the bag, here's where she makes the lining and so on. But these weekly wittery stitchy ones, I don't really think timestamps would help anybody. And especially now I've do give me feedback, but I do think that was a very good idea of Donna's, and I'll try and remember in subsequent weeks to do it, to say at the very beginning what you need, so you can then find out what you need, pause me, go and gather supplies, and then come back and stitch along with me at the same time. Sorry if you heard my son coming in. Actually, I'm quite liking the back as well. So I've got 2 more bits of spiny things to do and I've run out of green. I'm going to have to use that bright green, aren't I? But I really, really, really don't want to. What's this bit? No. Hang on, let's have a look in here. Aha, aha. Many more greens. Well, these have been tea dyed, so they're nicer. To me anyway. There we go, look, I've got more greens than I could ever need now. Let's have that one. That was that really vivid lime green if you've watched the TM rust dyeing video. Let's try and get its end out. That was super, super bright, almost neon. And now it's been in the tea. It's quite pleasant. Each to their own. And this is going to go badly wrong. I'm trying to get 2 strands off at once. Sometimes it works. What you really should do is get 1 strand at a time and then put them back together. But I got away with it. There's my needle gone. So I've got 2 more spiny bits to do. And then I have to think about what I want to do next. I do want to do something around the edges to kind of define the edges a little bit. So I could do blanket stitch, but that's not really speaking to me. I could just do an overcast stitch, and maybe that's... Actually, I'm going to do this bright green up the purple batiky one. So I'm thinking while I'm doing and talking to you at the same time. Now my tummy's rumbling. You can't hit that. Slightly finer, this thread. It wasn't DMC or anything, it was just some generic, I think it probably came out of a kit or something. It came in a you know, a big bundle of someone else's threads that was given to me. You know, it's that sort of cheaper cotton that you often get if you buy one of those little kits, embroidery kits. Unless you buy, you know, a good quality, you can get DMC kits and so on. But you know what I mean, you know, that sort of generic cheap stuff. It's got a completely different feel to it. It's not as soft. So you can really go to town with these, you know, think fantasy feathers. I mean, it's not a feather that you see on a bird, really. It's very much inspired by the machine stitch feathers. But, you know, if you didn't like this and you wanted to do a more realistic feather shape, then, you know, great. Do that. I hope some of you do, because then I can go looking in the Facebook group and getting so many ideas from all of you as well. But I like this because you get quite a nice big shape that lends itself to applique, and makes quite a nice surface then to embellish afterwards, because you've got these biggish blocks of colour. Right, I think I'm going to call that done for that one. I'm going to put that in the aughts and get a darker green for this last bit. This bit, some of this. When I throw them in that basket, I tuck the end under so they don't come unravelled and get all tangled up around each other. Oops. This screen thing, because it's several layers, is also handy. I can stick my needles in it. And I have to remember that I've stuck my needles in it. Now, am I going to get away with it twice, pulling 2 strands off at once? Because it's only a short length, I do believe I am. But I think I said earlier in the series, or maybe even in the introduction, you know, what you'll need video, that these, of course, you want your piece to be pleasant and to look at, and you want to enjoy doing it. That's the most important thing and all that. But at the same time, I try and view them as little experimental pieces. So it's a little piece that takes, you know, an hour or 2 or more. But it's not a huge investment of materials, especially not if you use scraps and leftovers. So it's kind of permission to play, really, you know, to experiment in a small area. And some of the things, I mean, I've got an idea for last week's that I want to do at one point that will be becoming a full tutorial based on last week's Wonky 9 patch. You know, sometimes things will inspire you to go and do something bigger. Quite a few people have now got pajagi curtains hanging proudly in their homes, I've seen. Some people are English paper piecing all over the place. But because the little jumpy off piece, you know, if you want to just make this piece and then move on, you can, you know, if it's not for you, if it doesn't float your boat. So really try and, or not try, don't try, just do. That's Yoda, isn't it? Do or do not, there is no try. I did promise a Star Wars week as well. I have to come up with something. Because there are a lot of Lord of the Rings fans in the Facebook group, at least, that came up after the Trixie cloths, because the word Trixie was, I learnt it from Gollum. Trixie little hobbit says. And then someone said something about R2-D2. So I thought, well, maybe there's some Star Wars fans as well. Maybe I need to come up with something. Maybe we'll stitch a Wookiee or something. Let the Wookiee win. Sorry, I won't start quoting from Star Wars. What was I saying? Yeah, these little pieces. Just view them as experimental pieces. and just see where they take you. And you might think, well, that was that week, very good, nice, done, put it in my book, tick it off, move on. Or you might think, oh, I really enjoyed that, I can see other ways of using that in other pieces, you know, and so forth. Right, so there we go. It's on my mid-ribs. You call them on leaves? They're not leaves, they're feathers. What do you call them on leaves? Spines? Something like that. So now I do feel that I need to do something. I do feel I need to cut that off for a start. Just around the edges. I think I'm just simply going to go around the edges with this dark red, just to define them a little bit. Now, am I going to use one strand or two? Now the issue here is if I just use one strand, I can get away with a really fine needle, and then I won't damage the edges of my patches, but then I won't have much in the way of definition of thread. If I use two threads, I need to use a bigger needle, slightly bigger needle, and I might, you know, especially this fray stuff, it might sort of mince it up a bit, you know what I mean? You know what I mean. But I'm going to go for two and mince it up, because I've got my super sharp tulip needles. This I do believe is a size 8. Might even be a 9. No, I think it's a 9 actually, which I can get 2 strands through. If you can get the thread through, and then when you look at it, more than half the eye is visible, and these tulips have got long eyes, so rather than wide eyes. So they're relatively easy to thread, she said, the one who's always having trouble threading. But they don't have a big wide eye, because it's the size of the eye that makes the hole for the thread to go through. So yeah, you just have to, if you take a couple of stitches and you find it catching, you just need a bigger needle. So I'm going to just start down here somewhere with this very frayed one. And yeah, now I'm doing blanket stitch. I don't want to do blanket stitch. I'm going to go back down because I want to go in the other direction. I'm just going to jump up over here. I'm just going to do a slanty stitch, I think, so that I'm coming up just off the edge of the little patch and I'm going down into the patch, because I think going that way, I hope I wasn't creeping out of shot there, going that way you're less likely to damage the edge. If you're coming up from behind and poking around, I think you're much more likely to damage the edge. And I don't mind if it, you know, it's raggedy applique anyway, I don't really mind too much of it super raggedy. Oops. See, there's bits coming off all over the place, but that's because I used a really fraying cloth like that Osnaburg. If you use batiks or, you know, excuse me, slightly denser cloths, you'll be better. So I'm going to do that. I'm sorry. Don't shout at me. I'm going to stop the camera and I'm going to go around all the edges, because I do want to do more to it and show you, rather than say I'll come back and show you it finished later. So I think I'd rather just go and do this around all the edges and then come back and show you, you know, do the next bit with you. So I'll be back in a bit. Well, for you it'll be no time. Okay, so I went around all the edges of all the plumes, and now I've just done one to see if I like it, and I do. I'm going to, just for you, Maria, you know who you are, Maria, you love them so much, I'm going to do some French knots just on the ends of each of the little veins. I'm going to do 4 wraps, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go down like a thread or two to the side of where you came out. And the very important thing is then you tension up this and hold it with your thumb while you pull through to the back. and that's French knot. So I'm going to do another one here, come up just at the end of that little line there, lay it down, hold this and wrap round I'm doing 4 wraps, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold this end firmly, go back in with your needle just to the side of where you came out, tension that and then hold that with your thumb while you pull through to the back. Oops, and don't get caught on the edge of your work and don't get bits of fluff caught in it. So I'm going to do that on the end of every little leaf vein, feather vein, whatever you're calling them, whatever we're calling them. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and down, tension. You don't want to pull it super tight or you won't be able to get your needle through. And now I'm going to go down to this one. I'm going to finish off and start again because it's a bit far to jump. Oops. So, not the end. Obviously you don't have to do French knots. You could do beads. I could have done beads. If I start up here and work my way down, then maybe I can get away with doing that next plume over without stopping and starting my thread. So 4 wraps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold the end. Tension it up. Hold it with your thumb. And let go only at the last minute. See, that one's a bit loopy, but I don't mind. I like loopy. I am loopy sometimes. What do you mean only sometimes? I heard you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tension. Hold with your thumb. I just think that is just what it needed actually, just to give it a bit of definition. And as my daughter's now put the tumble dryer on. Oh dear. Down here, I'm jumping around a lot on the back, I know. Getting great big long bits of stitches on the back, but I don't mind. Not when it's going in a book. And this one over here, right on the edge. Oops. I'm still in frame, yes, I'm still in frame. Whoops. That's it. Tension, hold with your thumb and pull through. And actually this thread's really short, so I'm going to have to finish it off anyway, I think, and get a new bit. I think I will put it in the aughts though. The thing with French knots is you do need quite a bit of length of thread, you know, because you have to be able to make the wrapping movement. But it's gone in the aughts, so it'll come in for something else. I saw a lady, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, it was in the private Facebook group. You see how much stuff goes on in there. And she was doing a stitch meditation scroll, but instead of collaging cloth on to then stitch through, she was doing just her aughts. So she just had one long piece of cotton sheet, or you know, whatever it was, just white cloth, and then she was just stitching her little bits like that aren't really much use for anything else. She was just stitching them into the cloth just as a place to keep them, you know, for them to be. I just thought that was lovely. Whoops. There's one. So I'm getting the needle about halfway through and then tensioning, holding with my thumb and pulling the rest of the way through. Sorry I made you wobble. I still haven't managed to rig up something for the camera stand so it's not attached to the desk. So apologies for making you wiggle. I try not to do that too often. It's never going to be slick and professional and, you know, brilliantly produced, my channel. It's just me doing my best. But I am trying to, you know, make it as pleasant as possible for you to watch. I'm just going to sneak over with all this technical stuff, all this stuff you have to learn. You know, it's been interesting. It's, you know, it's part of the process. Even the editing now, I've got to grips with the software. I'm enjoying it as a creative process. I don't know if the results are sometimes, you know, a bit jumpy or whatever. I would prefer not to edit at all and just have it all. Last week's was completely unedited, but I was here on my own. It was quiet. It just kind of flowed, and I got into something I started talking about that my mum had said, and ended up with that whole great long wittery storytelly thing. And thank you so much for everybody who responded positively to that being so long. But yeah, I wouldn't want them to be that long every week, and I'm sure you probably wouldn't either, although some of you might. Around the hour mark, I think, is ideal. And I think this might have passed the hour mark already. So I think once I've done these, I'm going to call it done, because I was wondering what... I knew it needed something after I'd done the edges. I did think about outline stitching, you know, on the cream, all the way around somehow. But I think these little French knots are just what was needed. And I like the way that, because I'm using the same dark red thread everywhere, but because the background patches are all different colours, the colour is showing up differently on each one. So I like that as well. And they kind of look like little rose vines growing in my feathers. And it is a fantasy feather, so, you know, obviously I'm not going for a realistic bird feather here. Oh, and I'm going to lose that thread if I'm not careful. Is there enough here to get away with two more? It's going to be challenging. But of course I'm going to try. And hope I don't regret it. You have to untwist your thread every now and then as well, because the act of winding it round the needle can make it get a bit twisty. And then it can be inclined to tangle. Whoop. This is really too short to be doing this with. Yes! Breathe, and breathe. Got away with it. How the stitching straight away gives substance to something. It just makes it feel, many of you said that last week about the wonky 9 patch, you know, because of putting wadding / batting in them, or doing some of you did the folding the seams so they met, so that the seam allowance padded them out a bit, you know, all that. It's not only about the look of the piece, it's also how it feels in your hands, isn't it? And how it feels changes as you put the stitching into it. But yeah, I wasn't sure about it until I did the French knots, and now I like it. I do. Of course, you don't have to do French knots. None of you have to do French knots except for Maria. I'm sorry, Maria. No, everybody can't like every stitch. There's many stitches that I don't like. I don't, in general, do a lot of kind of fancy embroidery stitches. I like running stitch, seed stitch, blanket stitch, ladder stitch, but they're all pretty rudimentary, straightforward stitches. If you said I was only allowed to do running stitch for the rest of my stitching life, then I would be quite happy with that. Maybe I might beg for seed stitch as well, but oh no, don't pull. Phew. Sometimes you get knots where you don't want knots, and that's not good. But yeah, you know, it's just, you know, again, it's each to their own. Some people love to do all the different fancy stitches. I've got stitch dictionaries, books that I've bought over the years showing you, you know, the A to Z of all the fancy stitches. But at one point I kind of kept telling myself that I should. Don't ever say should to yourself, certainly not when you're doing something that's supposed to be there to give you pleasure. But I did, I said should be doing more variety of stitches, but I've lost count, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. But then at one point I thought, well, why, you know? Why? Who says I should? Only me. And I don't have to listen to me. That's a bit far to just go. I'm just going to take a little bite through the back there. Yeah, so, you know, if you like doing lots of fancy stitches, don't tell yourself that that's too fancy and you should be doing plainer stitches. And if you only like doing 3, 4, I can't even count to 4 and talk at the same time, I'm sorry. If you only like doing plainer stitches, don't say, oh, I should be doing all these fancy embroidery stitches. And also, you can look at other people's work and find it beautiful and inspiring and even maybe get ideas from it, but you don't necessarily have to go and reproduce it exactly, unless you want to. I can remember going to quilt shows, you know, earlier on in my days as a quilter. Not when I was little and faffing about with my mum's scraps, I mean, you know, when I was teaching and professional. Why do I put that in inverted commas? I was getting paid for it, so it was professional. Coming away from shows and thinking, oh, my work's rubbish, and, you know, I should be doing what that person's doing, or I should be doing more of this and more of that. And I think that is all part of that journey that you make, and you have to learn at one point just to have your own voice and, you know, be contented with what you're doing yourself. And look to other people for inspiration, yes, but try and find your own voice in all that. Okay, so I'm done, I think. I think I'm done. I think I'm going to get the book in. The book, which is becoming chunkier, even though that's only week 10, and we've got another 42 to go in there. Find the page. It's my wonky from last week stitched in with the seed stitch. I don't think I ever actually showed you. Well, it was on the photograph at the end of the video, but there it is in, well, real life, you know what I mean. There it is in a video. The dangle has gone walkabout. Put a little beady dangle on. So this is also the last page of my signature. I'll have some cream to sew it on with. There's something in here. I'll have that bit of yellow, that's close enough, I think. I don't mind that at all. Very pale yellow. This kind of yellow is the colour of spring to me a bit as well. So many of the spring flowers are yellow. I'm already seeing dandelions here and there. And also on the old track in the far woods, the primroses are just starting to come out, or they were the other day when I was over there with my mum. Alright, I'm going to anchor it into the cloth first a little bit. I'm going to stitch it across the top. Now you know that my head might appear. Apologies in advance. Oh, and I haven't. Where's the... oh no. Oh, there it is. Whew. I don't know where the one out of the book went to. I was keeping mine in a book. Alright. Giant paper clip. I have to come right up to the very edge, otherwise I'll be stitching through the top of my feather, and I don't want to do that. And that's really wonky. Even for me. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that in the end. It seems like it's not remotely me at all. It's not remotely the kind of thing I usually do, but I quite like it. So, yeah. That's a little bit what I was talking about, you know, experimenting. Right, when I get close to the spine I have to stab stitch because I can't get... Oh dear, don't do that to me. There we go. Come back through the same hole. Not the same, exact same hole, otherwise that would have pulled my stitch through. I mean the previous hole. I'll just anchor it. And I don't think I'm doing a dangle because I think there's enough going on this feather. So, now I need my pencil. Get my giant paper clip off again. Oops, oh dear, careful of your French knots. Park it back down there, so I've got it for next week. And we are the 4th of March. March already. Am I writing the number or the name of the month? I'm writing the number. 4, 3, and I'm not normally doing that, I'm normally doing a dot, but anyway, doesn't matter. 24. Sign it. Always proudly sign your work. Someone once said to me, so I do, and I'm going to write hope, and I think I'll write that in capitals, is the thing with feathers. And I'm not going to write the whole poem, I'm just going to put 3 dots because I will know that there's more to follow. And I do love the back of that as well. Here we go, so that's week 10. Fantasy feather, as inspired by my free motion machine quilting past career. I hope you like that. Like I said, I will put down in the description a link to some online, you know, free quilting templates where you could trace if you weren't happy drawing freehand. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to seeing your fantasy feathers in the Facebook group and on Instagram. And thanks so much for watching. I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.